Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Mitch Rapp podcast. How you doing this week, Mike?
Dude, it's the Code Red podcast. This has been a long time coming since we got the title reveal, since we got the news of Kyle writing his last book in the series. We've got the Steven Weber announcement. He'll be the narrator and the audiobook reader for this. Dude, we've been hyping and pumping this up for so long, and it's finally here.
I am so excited. It's kind of like bittersweet. Everyone, we have like this group chat with our patrons, and everyone's like, oh, I just finished it. I'm like halfway through. And some people were saying they were savoring it. Even though I've had this book for a while now, I haven't wanted to pick it up. Not because I'm worried about it, but I just didn't want it to come, if that makes sense.
Yeah, same here.
Whereas like when we got Deadfall,
Yeah.
I immediately dig into it. Like even if I only got even if I only got into a couple chapters, I just wanted to rip into it. But this one I left there. And I brought it on my trip, obviously, and we said we were gonna record part one today. And so I sat down yesterday, started reading it, and I was savoring it. I sat outside of my hotel with a beer. I'm drinking some true Milwaukee brews, Schlitz. I don't know if anyone on the podcast knows what this beer is, but it's a
old school
Milwaukee beverage.
Watching a Brewers game.
I was just savoring my last Kyle Mills Mitch Rapp book, kind of like Mitch Rapp was savoring, his time in Paris with Claudia. And I definitely want to dig into the first half of this book, and I want to dig into like the bigger picture of Kyle, what this means, where you think what you're thinking. But my first gut reaction, my first gut thing is like I have very mixed feelings. I like it, but I don't but I'm not like loving it, but I love it, but I don't like it. It's very weird. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what if you feel the same way, Mike.
First off, I'm having so many similar emotions, the roller coaster of emotions. This book stared me down for a few weeks. Like, we got it quite a while back.
We got it a while ago.
We did. And almost every time I see the ambassadors posting, I want to be in with the crowd, right? I want to be right there talking about it. Usually I get a little side chat or side DMs going with people who finished it, within a night or two. I don't know why. This one, it just stared at me. It was like giving me that challenge of like, you got to do it, Mike. You like, Kyle's time is coming to a close. Like, we have to say goodbye. We have to put the stamp on it. And it was hard to come around and get there. And when I finally picked it up, the story really did get me. But I am with you. I am not making any final conclusions or judgments until we cover part two. I'm really glad we'll be interviewing Kyle in between our part one and part two. Now, some might say that will color our final judgment, but sure. I want that in this case. I want a chance for him to tell us where he was at, where the characters were at, in his opinion. And I do want to hear a little backstory on where this book came from and how it got to where it is. That being said, I'm not offering a final judgment. I've seen a lot of people posting, middle of the pack, one of Kyle's better books, not his best. I'm not gonna wade into that water yet. But I will say this. This book is packed with some absolute gems, some pure Kyleisms that are top-notch, some one-liners, absolute zingers, and I even found some very, very warming callbacks to Vince Flynn. And I think this book is very subtle. I'm not going to say where I am on the overall plot or anything yet. That scorecard will come, folks. But right now on this pod, I'm going to say in the first half of this book are some absolute genius subtleties. And I want to get into those with you, Chris. And here's one example of this. I was hesitant to pick up the book, and I told myself, I'm not taking any notes. I'm reading this as a pure fan through and through. Not a critic, not a podcaster, not an evaluator. Right. However, that was only my approach, my mindset. I immediately wanted to start taking notes because of how good some of the writing was.
No, I I totally agree. And
I wanted
I
quotes.
found myself started, I even highlighted some quotes,
Yes.
and that's not me. You know, that's
No.
not me.
And I didn't want
I
to do
don't,
that.
I don't know if you got the sense, but there was some true, and even though this book yet hasn't like really gotten into, it's not like super huge geopolitical like Belt and Roads Initiative, but it has like this backdrop of this geopolitical thing with the whole Syrian mess. And I feel like Kyle is, diving into his inner, I mean, not to say like, but like it's very reminiscent of what like Brad Thor does. I liked it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you not?
I'm not sure if I do yet, but I'll be honest with you. I actually don't care. Like,
Mm.
we had Brad Thor do it expertly. You couldn't do it better in his last two books, in
Oh yeah,
Deadfall
for
and
sure.
Rising
For
Tiger.
sure.
The whole geopolitical stuff. You've got Jack Carr doing the dark side of man. You've got him doing the warrior, the weapons thing. And Kyle was never super attuned to the weapons. He had Rod, who he had on the pod, and other people advised him on this. And the thing is, I don't need that in a Mitch Rapp book right now. I need the things we got. The small moments with Mitch and Claudia reflecting on their future. Mitch in Afghanistan, but thinking about what home is to him. There's a really great couple of opening paragraphs about where is home to Mitch Rapp, and it's actually
Sure.
the food burning on a fire in the middle of the desert, and it's the smells and the dust and the stone of Afghanistan. And he's like, although that's my natural home, it's not my home anymore. My home now should be South Africa. It should be Virginia. And so that's the kind of stuff I need in a Kyle Mills, Mitch Rapp novel at this point in the series. So the fact that I'm not sure if I'm jiving with the geopolitical stuff, I don't care. I really don't. And maybe the weapons, right? You can get some car heads who are like, well, give me descriptions of all the weapons and the different things and the tactical stuff. And there's some of that, right? Especially this final scene we're getting to today in chapter 17, this op in Syria. There's some of it, but I'm so glad to see Kyle, I think, leaning into his strength. I would say leaning into the strengths of this series and where this series is at right now. And I want to get into it and talk about some of the specifics that Kyle is absolutely knocking out of the park in this one.
Yeah, and I feel like he went back to, what makes Mitch Rapp,
Yes.
like his athleticism. Even though he's old, he's
Yep.
aging, but
His
he's still
sacrifices.
he's still super athletic. His sacrifices, he's a man of his word.
Yes. Yes.
And kind of like you said, you could tell. And I don't know if this is like a subtle thing or an overly overt thing in terms of pulling upon hints of all of Mitch Rapp's past, like
Yes.
talking about like Stan Hurley and bringing up Maggie Nash and Mike Nash and obviously his whole relationship with Irene. And obviously you have to do some of that stuff with to set up the story relative to the last book, but some of it just felt like it was a little bit extra in the sense that this is going to be Kyle's last time telling that to
Yeah.
us. So you
Yeah.
know what I mean? I don't know, and it's just maybe just because I'm fully invested in the story. I know it from start to finish, so I'm picking up on those cues a little bit more.
Yeah.
Bringing up Louis Gould, like even not saying him by name, but just talking about him, talking about the fact that Anna has like a little bit of her father in her.
Yeah.
Going back to Paris. This is a very Mitch has spent a lot of time there. It's a city that we love, and we've gotten a couple books set in Paris. Like it's I felt like that was a little bit of tap into the nostalgia of things. We mentioned in the last book that he was tapping that nostalgia beat too, and you could, if we didn't know it from the last book, we definitely know it now that he was
Yep.
obviously going down this path, and we could we could see where it's going.
It's almost crescendoing here. And it just seems like a swan song the way it's being done. And for that reason, so far, any quibbles I've had with different parts of the book and the story, I'm putting aside because I'm so captivated by those nods. You mentioned Hurley, right? We get this line. While Hurley had been wrong about a lot in life, his advice on the subject of killing was impeccable.
I underline that one for you, Mike. For
Dude,
you.
why thank you, Chris? Why thank you? Well, let's underline it both for Kyle. Let's get
Uh,
highlighters, underlining, Sharpie, asterisk in the margin. All that for Kyle because that's epic. And then, dude, all these callbacks. Listen to this one. How Flynnian is this? It's such a tribute to Vince to write this line. Quote, none of them were the enemy. And he's talking about the guys around the campfire in Afghanistan,
Right.
the Taliban.
Right.
He says, none of them were the enemy. Not anymore. The enemy now was the people in Washington and Langley who had set this up. The betrayal wasn't here. It was back home. Like, bro, that's so early Vince. It's a nod to every one of his themes having the villains as the real, the politicians as the real enemy. The ones who were jeopardizing what Rapp and Irene and all the crew wanted to do. And for Kyle to slip that in, I just think a little thing like that would make Vince so proud. And then 2 lines later, the Taliban guys call him the Angel of Death.
Right.
Like, that was Rapp's nickname through all of the Vince books. Like, Consent to Kill, he was the Angel of Death. He's coming. And we get a nod to that. It's really, really smart. It's like this metacognitive thing Kyle's doing. I can't wait to ask him if he was aware of this or he's just become so comfortable with the series that all these nods to Vince and earlier books are just natural.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a little bit of both for sure. If I had to guess, he is so in tune with the series. I would say it's his now, and it's his to pass on. He's fully embraced it. And you gotta admit, like, all right, this is gonna be my last time to write any of this stuff. I need to figure out what I want to say, be true to the story, highlight Vince in the best way possible. The one thing I want to ask you though, and it's a tough question, right? So following up the last 2 books, our saga with the Cooks, how do you feel about this hard turn to essentially send Mitch on like a long side quest? How do you feel about that being his final, like Kyle's final installment, to have Mitch, we're chapter 17 is roughly halfway through the book. We're like 140-ish pages in.
We didn't even mention that yet. Yeah, just for the people, we're only going up through chapter 17
right
to the end of 17 on this pod.
We've gotten maybe 3 pages of Irene Kennedy. It's very Mitch heavy. I guess secondary character would be Claudia, and then we've gotten a lot of Damian Losa. Like this, it's this character that Kyle, you can tell, loves, that he created and wanted to explore this. And I guess, obviously seeing that this is his last time to explore it, he wanted to go down that route. But I don't know. I just want to get your thoughts on not I'm not trying to diminish it and saying that it is a side quest, but it's like a side quest that now, once you involve all the Russians, it's no longer a side quest. It becomes like what's going to be Mitch's primary quest. All right. It's essentially, I guess just to spoil everything, like the Russians are trying to infiltrate this drug cartel by putting in this super drug that 6 months later, people are going to be like freaking zombies, right? In psychotics. So it's the same thing as if we have Memorial Day with a bomb. It's killing mass amounts of people, right? It's some crazy terrorist thing. But the whole setup to it is not that at all.
Okay. I see where you're coming from with that question. And this idea of a side quest, I don't know if I want to accept the premise of the question, although I guess I have to, because leaving Claudia to go on this mission kind of makes it a side quest. Not having Irene as backup, it's very clearly stated you won't have our resources doing this. I guess in that sense, it does make it into a bit of a side quest. But like you said, it's building to something that will involve the Russians. And I think it's deeper than that, because this Semenov character, who is the Russian mastermind in Syria, you could say appointed to Syria, but really, kicked out into the backwater of Syria, his triumphant plans to return home and crown himself, essentially take over from Utkin and navigate the waters of politics in Russia to take the throne, if you will. I find that very compelling. And that is building. And it's been teased in the early chapters with this very, very compelling character to me, Semenov. So it's one thing that I think it is building towards something more than a side quest. Two, I think we have to kind of leave things be. I thought it very interesting that early in the book, Kyle wrote, there's a new administration. Terrence Adams, the vice president for Cook, is now in charge and doesn't want to run again. We've got Irene reinstalled as the director again.
Right.
So I'm almost okay if this is a side quest in the sense of you just painted very broad brushstrokes, and now Don Bentley can pick up, the finer brush and really start coloring, in between the lines. So if it's not a side quest and building something to as revolutionary as upsetting the Utkin, administration in Russia, that's huge because that takes us back to, Red War, really. That's the culmination of a big Mitch Rapp universe plot. But if we either don't get there or if we don't go back to Irene and Claudia on the comms and doing the logistics and Scott and his organization, because he even writes he's off taking a contract in Lithuania or Estonia or something. I'm okay with it kind of being this isolated story to turn things over to Don. I just don't know. I can't answer the question because the second half of the book, I think there's a lot of story to be told. And so I don't know if you're quite, did you tee up, a red herring for me there? I don't know. Am I stepping
I
in
don't know
a trap
either.
door?
I don't know.
Is this a trap door?
Either.
I don't know. And that's interesting to me, right? It could be. It could fall flat. It could be amazing. So that's a tricky one, man. That's a tricky one.
My guess is that it makes the most sense to do this. If you going into it knowing that this is going to be your last installment, your last touch point of the series, you're not going to want to ruffle too many feathers. You're not going to want to, have some sort of groundbreaking, make Mitch Rapp the president, or, kill off a major character, some kind of bullshit like that. So you want to have a fun, entertaining, engaging, not summer read. Like that's what these things are, sell a lot of books, have people enjoy it, have people read it, be true to the Mitch Rapp story. And this is what you're going to do. I like the angst that Mitch has being this Matthew character. What was his name? What's his Canadian name?
Matthew Fournier.
Fournier. Yeah.
It's a different cover than he's ever really had to have.
It harkens back to his cover in Lethal Agent, which is another one of my favorite novels. Not I guess it's not a cover per se, but like that. Remember when he has to go be the bodyguard for like essentially Miley Cyrus / Justin Bieber,
Now that's a side quest. That little chapter is definitely a side quest.
Definitely, but then that engages him to Mexico or to
when he goes to Esparza in Mexico, he's not quote undercover. He has to convince them that he had nothing left to live for, that the American government turned on him because he got in with the drug dealers, and he's literally just doing this because he needs money and he has skills. And so he has to actually convince them he's himself, but he's no longer the same self attached. He was. Yeah. I don't know. Is that an alias or is that just a ruse? That's just deception.
So again, you didn't bring this up yet. Like the fact that he can just walk into when people know he's the angel of death in Afghanistan, can he walk into Syria and people not know who he is?
Oh, I was sold. The way Claudia was talking about his suit and his hair and his shoes, that he was a different man.
He's got enough of the disguise to cover himself up.
Oh, absolutely. I think he said it took him like 4 days to work on him or something like that.
Okay.
Hey, and that harkens back to my initial point, which was this idea of what is home to Mitch. Is that physical transformation with a bunch of manicurists? Is that a symbol of Rapp leaving the grit and the dirt and the sweat of being on the field in Afghanistan? I mean, I just thought that reflection was so cool. Let me actually read this. This was okay. And here's a little quibble. I am not trying to armchair quarterback here or armchair author. Actually, if we could be accused of anything on this pod, it's being armchair authors.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
However, I think this one might be valid. So listen to this quote. It happens in chapter 4. So we've already established Rapp on the ground because chapter 1 opens with him and the team, including Scott, going through the desert. Well, actually, they're in the Hindu Kush, so it is a little rocky terrain. But chapter 4 opens with, quote, A shrink would probably be concerned that Rapp associated the smell of Afghanistan with home. Dust, stone, and food cooked over open fire. The reason he'd been able to operate so successfully in the region was that to some extent he'd gone native. He'd never seen his time in country as a tour. He rarely felt a compulsion to go, quote, home. He didn't belong there anymore. He belonged in Virginia, in South Africa. It still surprised him how clear that had become. He had a place, and it was with Claudia and Anna. Bro, that could have been chapter 1. Can you imagine the first line of this book when we go from the prologue, this side story in Salerno, which maybe we should talk about, to chapter 1? You know, we always want in chapter 1 a cold open with Rapp. And if it said, a shrink would probably be concerned that Rapp associated the smell of Afghanistan with home. To me, that's an epic first line. Epic first line.
Yeah. No, but I did enjoy the fake out. Like the whole, like I was confused.
It was great.
I was like, what's going on here? And Kyle's, again, this writing is very good. The fact that as you're reading it, you yourself are supposed to be confused, just as he's trying to confuse the people that he's going after, right?
Yeah.
To get these hostages. Yeah, no, like I was vibing the first couple chapters of this book, like, and then cutting back between, we have Salerno from the one angle, and then we go back to Salerno from Damian Losa's angle with this chick that he's with, sitting at some Michelin star restaurant, which I wish I was at. I don't know, like we need to get into the Damian Losa of it all, like how you feel of him as a character too.
We do. We have to talk the Damian Losa of it all. And that prologue. Can we stay in Afghanistan though? Because you're not kidding. That fake out was epic. When the first scene of Mitch Rapp and the guys, they're randomly spraying bullets at basically an abandoned house. And he's like, hey, let me put a few into the animal trough over here for no reason. I'm like, what am I supposed to read into this? Do they just suck now? I was like,
yeah, that's what I thought. I thought like they're all washed up.
I was like, are they just shooting up a house, not knowing if guys are inside? Like, I was like, are we going there? And here's the thing. We were kept dangling on that string until the chopper landed for the exfil. When the dudes got into the chopper and then as it takes off, they roll out the other side. I lost it. I was like, that is just super, super cool. And they were yelling loud enough for the villagers to hear them. We didn't find the insurgents. They're not here. Let's go, guys.
Didn't find anything here.
It was fun.
Guess we should leave.
It was downright fun.
Like I said, like just the confusion of the writing led to me as a reader being confused, like what the hell is going on? And then it clicks and you're like, all right, Mitch has got this.
It draws you in.
And then he sneaks up on him, right? He's dressed, he's gone native. He can, that's always been his advantage, right? That he can blend in these areas. We harken back to the very first novel, American Assassin, when they talk about, not the first novel, but the first time we meet Mitch chronologically. He's supposed to be this guy who the reason that he's tapped is because he can blend in so well.
It's like transfer of power, Mitch, right when we meet him.
Yeah, exactly.
The old beggar. Yeah, the old beggar on the streets of Iraq.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
That's another nod, another one of these subtle nods to Vince and early Rapp. It's incredible. And then how that scene culminates. I mean, that is almost equally as enthralling. And again, when he's approaching these Taliban guys, it's very deep. He's talking about, you're not the enemy anymore. That quote I read before. I don't want to kill you guys. My beef and America's beef is no longer with the Taliban because unfortunately our government made the decision. The people essentially made the decision that they're going to have to listen to the will of the Taliban. They're not going to form an insurgency anymore against them. And that's what it is. And Rapp's kind of accepting that chapter of his life, that chapter of American history, which is kind of hard for him. But he's doing that as he's also trying to free these hostages. So he's still completing the mission. Irene even says, I'm sorry I sent you into a trap, but we had to get him, right? Like, you ultimately came up with a plan to do it, but I don't know the agency. Oh, dude, and then this is really interesting. Irene is trying to sort through who she can trust still in the intelligence game. Like, that was cool. And that's something for Don to really pick up and
right.
get into.
I thought that this novel was going to be about that.
I want it now. Yeah.
That makes complete sense. And I don't know. I didn't like the fact that kind of off book she was reinstalled as that's my biggest pet peeve or biggest qualm with the first half is just this one liner with Irene back in charge of the CIA. I was like, really?
Yeah.
Because that was the whole thing was like she might not go back. She's happy being Nicholas Ward's, whatever, like, but then just to go a 180 and pull it back, I guess Kyle felt like he had to do that, but I don't know.
Where'd Big Nick go? Where's Big Nicky Dubs? Like, we loved that guy in Enemy at the Gates. We loved him. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that Kyle just got tired of, there's times, we've analyzed enough books to realize when authors just aren't in love with a character they've written anymore,
Is it that, or is it the circumstances? I feel like if we ever get the Kyle Mills biopic, which Chris, I think you'd make a great Kyle Mills on screen here. So let's fan cast for the Kyle Mills biopic.
I just want to interview Kyle. I want to sit down and interview him and talk about the entire experience. Cause I think, not now, like in the end, but like 5 years from now, I would love to sit down with Kyle, and have like a dateline where, or, where we talk about 60 minutes where we talk about what he felt taking over for a major popular author after his death. And then why he felt he needed, now was the time to leave. And then also all the pressures of just writing and, coming up with his ideas and having to change on the fly.
Yeah.
And, I would love to get that insider information.
And I think you put your finger on it, that the Enemy at the Gates, Nicholas Ward, Mike Nash, and all the craziness that ensued right after that, he could have been a turning point, an inflection point in his, I don't know, just his comfortability with having authority over the stories. I don't know it. I just feel like the rewrites, that was when we first started hearing like about rewrites. And then with this one, right, we heard about the Wagner group and all that going on. He had to do some edits, and in some other ones in between, I'm sure the editing process as well was very, very burdensome and overbearing. I really do wonder from an outsider's view, like what that did to him, just psychologically as an author, as an artist, right? As a creative, like, to have so much pressure of fandom, editors, publishing house, whoever, whatever voice is in the arena, not just talking to you, but like it must feel like screaming at you. I'm not saying this happened, but just how that must feel. Like, I imagine at school, like if I'm getting so much criticism from parents about something over a lesson, like it might not be a big deal, but it feels like you're just getting attacked from all sides,
Sure,
and you got to diffuse it. I wonder, has he ever felt that way? Has it ever gotten that way? I don't know. Something with the Enemy at the Gates era, rewriting books with January 6th, and just it got messy, wouldn't you say? It got dicey.
Yeah, it's a hard time to be a thriller, political spy, and not to go. You either embrace it and go political and do your own stance, or if you want to be this toe the line kind of author that wants to be able to sell to everybody, then it's tough. It's very tough, and that honestly is a sad thing that authors have to be walking on pins and needles essentially to not piss off 50% of their audience, in either direction, not to say of anything. It's just, it's very strange. It's very strange. I don't know.
Well, it won't be revealed until 15 years from now when you're on 60 Minutes with Kyle, or we see his biopic in, 4D, whatever Super IMAX is by then. So,
I would not even Kyle. I would love to just talk to Jack Carr, Brad Thor. Like,
you should start a podcast where you're able to do that.
It would have to be off mic though. It would have to be like, something, the X-Files, the hidden tapes where they could, I would just love to, be a fly on the wall during the editorial process to see like how much Emily Bessler actually writes these books, or how much sway various factors have in choosing these things. To
Yeah.
me, it's like the author writes it and then that's what happens, but I know that's not what happens.
You know what's cool? This whole conversation came out of a banger of dialogue that Kyle wrote between Rapp and some Taliban dudes around a bonfire in the Hindu Kush. Like all of that and him talking about like what America is and who the enemy is, getting out of the game, where is home, what's my priorities. We just went on that tangent all because of that campfire scene in Afghanistan, like which was literally like 6 lines of dialogue back and forth.
Yeah. See, that's what Kyle does to us.
You want a little behind the scenes, right? Well, guess who's operating behind the scenes while Rapp is talking to the Taliban guys? Scott motherfucking Coleman, baby. He is rescuing the hostages. How badass was that of him sneaking up on that guard, killing him? Or, well, no, he's very hesitant.
He doesn't want to kill him.
Doesn't want to kill him. So instead, he just, smashes his head with a rock. Although, there's a great line there. It says Coleman was more ambivalent, but he still had no desire to kill this kid. Unfortunately, his non-lethal toolkit was nearly non-existent. That's some great alliteration. His non-lethal toolkit was nearly non-existent. That just flows beautifully.
Well, and who was the guy that he called to defuse the bomb? Because he doesn't
Bro,
say the name.
Are you serious? No, hold on. That we don't have evidence that's got to be Marcus, bro. Don't play.
I figured it was because he said he was playing video games.
Yeah, and then he calls him swollen dick.
But Marcus doesn't defuse bombs.
No, but Marcus could look up the schematics for the lock system.
Okay.
Wait, he didn't use Marcus's name? In my mind, I was 100% dead set that was Marcus.
I might be wrong.
No, we got to find this. All right, let's see what chapter we're talking.
We're on chapter 3.
Is it that early? I literally have to know if there's text evidence that proves that it's Marcus. Because if there's any gray room, if that's Marcus or not, oh my God, my mind is blown.
I'm almost positive he doesn't say his name.
He doesn't use his name? All right. Is that because the video game comment Kyle just knows is enough? It has to be. Has to be Marcus. I was about to say to you, another callback was that we get Marcus. Marcus Dumont, baby. All right, here we go. Page 34. He pulled out a sat phone and selected a number from the list of people he had on call that night. I'm in the fucking Hindu Kush staring at a bomb. Don't get your panties wadded up, man. I was just pausing my game. Oh, it's gotta be. Coleman could picture the man sitting in his basement, holding a game controller, surrounded by empty beer cans and Dorito bags. Okay, we're asking Kyle. Kyle, is swollen little dick Marcus? I need to know.
The puffy little prick was the best in the business, and not by a little.
Dude, more alliteration.
The puffy little prick.
The swollen little dick had done it again. This stuff, Kyle, you gotta stop it. You gotta stop it. This is killing me. When I read that Coleman Marcus scene, I was all over the place.
Did you pack your padlock, Shim?
Yeah. Does Marcus give it back that much?
Yeah, that's what.
Pardon me for not packing my padlock, Shim.
That's what also makes me feel like.
Is he sassy like that in his latter days?
I don't know. I feel like, wouldn't he have just said Marcus if it was Marcus?
Dude, this is a great debate. To Marcus or not to Marcus, that is the question. Kyle would have to have deliberately not used his name just to fuck with us. Damn it, Kyle.
Damn it.
I don't want that biopic anymore. I'm not watching a movie of you. I'm not watching you on 60 Minutes with Chris.
That'd be sick if I was the host of 60 Minutes.
Dude, can you please remind me when we interview Kyle to get an answer on this? If I forget, I'm literally going to kick myself.
We have to. We have to. That
might be the number one question I want to ask him now. All right, I think we've gone on longer than this than we do our rant about covers. Probably time to move on.
Yeah, probably. All right, so do you want to talk a little bit about like the plot of this book, like in terms of the Captagon, the bus gone bad or the shipment gone bad in Italy, how Damian Losa's involved, like essentially
Yeah.
why, you know, the premise of this entire novel is that Rapp has to honor his favor from was that last book?
Yeah, with Gustavo Maraqui when he
Yeah,
calls him in to save Oath of Loyalty to save Claudia or to find the guy who took out the hit on Claudia.
on Claudia. Yeah, so that's a quick calling of the favor, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess like Kyle has to. It's his last book, so he's. I feel like this. If Kyle was continuing, he
It
could
would have
have.
been later.
It would have been later. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Claudia even says, I knew he'd call in his marker at some point, but I didn't think it'd be this soon.
Right.
None of us thought things would be this soon, aka
Yeah.
Kyle. Kyle leaving us and George being kicked out. No, I'm just delete that one. We have no evidence of that, people. No evidence. We're
Yeah, we don't know if
speculating.
George was kicked out. We don't know
And
if
this
George was
is
kicked
why
out.
we don't have a sponsor.
I I hope that George wasn't kicked out. If I find out that George wasn't kicked out, I may. If George was kicked out, I might stop covering these books.
All I could say is on the Vince Flynn website, I appreciated the letter from George that said, I felt the time. The time is now to pass on the torch. And the fact that he wrote that gives me some comfort.
Yeah.
So,
Right, give me your thoughts about Damian Losa, Captagon, all that stuff.
I actually want to separate the two because I really kind of like Damian Losa, yet I'm not sure I'm so bought into the early chapters about the drug trade. For example, I don't know. I thought the prologue was a little weak. From the prologue to the dinner scene with the woman were not my favorite part of the Captagon drug trade story. Yet Semyonov experimenting on the prisoners, I find really interesting. Like it has that twisted, effed up nature to it. I'm actually curious, right? Like, could any element of this be going on in whatever drug trials or even like other countries that are trying to do actual medical research? Is sometimes this kind of stuff happening under the radar to get results? Even not just criminal empires, but how much are they in bed with real governments and organizations? So it's kind of creepy. So I liked the drug trade once we got to Syria because Rapp's in Syria negotiating with people undercover, an alias, which is I found really cool. And then Semyonov, we're cutting back and forth to him experimenting on his prisoners and hearing how he's such a pompous jerk. I'm digging that stuff. The first few times we brought up Captagon, getting it explained to us, I don't know if it captured me early on. Would you feel the same way?
Yeah, it wasn't until we kind of got, I think it was chapter 16 that Semyonov kind of like laid out his entire plan, and I fully understood what the goal of this was. Because in the beginning, I was just like, all right, what is this drug? Is it's just supposed to be more potent than fentanyl, or it's a cheaper version of that?
Right.
Is this the Middle Eastern version of the Purdue family? Like, where are we going here? But then once I started to understand, all right, why does he have these prisoners? Okay, and then what are they doing with tests wise? And then finally, they just literally lay it all out on the floor with the one scientist saying they cracked the withdrawal code, and
Yep.
they've been able to force these people who are holdouts to now grovel at their feet to just get their daily dose.
Yep.
And then he breaks down, like literally you get all the exposition in terms of what the drug will do 6 to 12 months from now once they've released it out to the world. It's like really like you get this like sense of fear and like, oh shit, like this is what Mitch is going to have to stop,
Yeah.
And that was great. I felt like, all right, now we have this world ending, potential event that Mitch has to deal with. And I understand why we're going down this route with Mitch. But at the same time, I realize that like Mitch doesn't always have to be in a story where it's end of the world. So I find myself in this weird position of liking, disliking, not disliking, just like liking, not loving, loving, not liking, various portions. It's strange.
I'm with you completely, especially your point on I spent the first bunch of chapters thinking, all right, this is opioids and fentanyl, and then you give it a different name,
Right.
big whoop. And I was like, okay, the European drug trade, kind of interesting, but I guess you're going with the refugee crisis and porous borders and how easy it is for Middle Eastern organizations to pump this stuff in and make a profit off it. Okay, sure, I get it. And then when Semenov reveals all that other stuff he's doing with the game plan to use it in America, his long game is to get it into the U.S., and we become zombies, essentially, right? We become slaves. I feel like that's way worse than what's going on with fentanyl, because you're going to get occasional users, but all of a sudden they're brain dead. It could cause a permanent psychosis and all different sorts of mental disorders, and they'll be begging at your feet for it even after just a few doses. Like, okay, so this is a step up. This is steroids on steroids. Fentanyl on steroids. So I'm like, okay, now I'm buying into it, and that's his long game. Took me a while to get there, so I'm just being honest. Like, a buy-in score here, I think I'm bought into all the action scenes in terms of the writing. We all know Kyle can write a knockout action scene. Maybe that's what we should talk about next. A couple of these other action scenes we haven't got to, like the one everything's building towards in Syria. So all that I got bought in on. I just don't know how much I buy into the early chapters on there's a drug, there's these pills, we're fighting over who can dominate the European market. And are the Arabs going to be able to do it, or can a Mexican drug lord corner the market? It's almost like, okay, who cares? But then once you bring in Rapp, once you bring in the Russians, and once we give a reason for him to go to Syria, I'm in. So up and downs. There's some up and downs here.
Yeah, but I think like what saves the first part for me is these touch points we get with Rapp and Claudia, and Rapp's different conversations either in Afghanistan or in Syria. So like that's why like there's parts of this where I'm like I'm loving it and I'm digging it, and then you have this like backdrop of things and I'm not vibing with. So that's why it's a very mixed bag, the first half of this novel for me. So
yeah, but you're right. The fact that it's broken up by the barbecue scene, come on. It's Kyle's wheelhouse, man. When he's coming home from the Afghan op and he's rolling up into Manassas, into the complex, checking all the cars. He knows everybody who's going to be there. He's perturbed, right? That it turns into this big gathering. It's so quintessential. Mitch, getting home from these ops, has a lot on his mind. And he's got to not battle Claudia, but Claudia's like, go outside, talk to people, start the grill up.
Start the grill. Yeah.
He's got to battle Anna, hitting them
Ask
in the
people
ribs.
what they want to drink. Yeah.
He calls her the Oompa Loompa. He's telling her to start the grill. She's like, I want to go bike riding. You said we go on the trails. He promises he'll get them bikes. He calls her a broken record. And she's like, what's a record?
But she calls him dad.
Yes.
That was a big thing. When she says dad and he like winces a little bit, she's like, he's not used to it. He's like, most of the time she calls me Mitch, but every now and then she calls me dad. And it just, doesn't feel right to him. I love those moments. Like I hope that Don continues down this path and uses those touch points, because those are the kind of things that Kyle has brought into this novel, the series, that I love.
I agree.
The Anna Mitch relationship, the Anna Claudia Mitch relationship is amazing. And anyone who out there who says they don't like it, you can stop listening to this podcast.
Yeah. It sets it apart.
Like and it's got to stay. It's got to stay.
Yeah. It's the difference maker. To me, there's not much in the Mitch Rapp universe at this point that sets it apart. Like, this is what I was trying to say before. The action's going to be great across the Thrillerverse. Crazy plots and geopolitical set pieces going to be awesome across the Thrillerverse. So many people, are up in their game and doing it well. The difference maker in this series is what Kyle did with those characters you just named. The way he put them together and gives us little moments like that, the Oompa Loompa line, to me makes this series and Mitch Rapp right now very different. When Vince Flynn was writing Mitch Rapp, a whole bunch of other things made it stand out and made it different and differentiated it. Right now, those things are the differentiator. Even smaller scenes. Joe Maslick and Mitch cracking beers trying to fix the fence. Like,
yeah.
Those little moments mean so damn much to me. And
especially when you know
Yeah,
their relationship as a fan who's read entire books and you understand Joe,
what they've been through.
what the two of them have been through.
He didn't trust him. Yeah.
Exactly. Like
Maz let him down. He failed on a few ops.
that's why, lifetime readers or series long readers get the added benefit that, someone who just picked up this novel would, that conversation is perfectly fine. It's a secondary character. He's explained perfectly. He's funny. He's goofy. But understanding the deeper relationship between the two just adds that much more to it. And I feel like that's something that Kyle
Yep.
has brought to this. So
I agree. And Kyle almost doubles down on doing all this. I feel like that barbecue scene was like a statement.
sure.
This is what I've done and did for the series. And I salute you, Kyle. I stand by it. He even writes Claudia and Mitch's relationship. He's kind of given a nod to the haters. There's a lot of Claudia haters out there who didn't buy Kyle's move to put them together. And we've rehashed it a million times. Go back and read everything from Consent to Kill to The Last Man. And you will realize what Kyle did in The Survivor is absolutely epic and on point to what Vince would have wanted. The clues are there, but he doubles down on it. And he writes this quote, which I 100% stand by. And I will be a keyboard warrior. You go into battle on the socials respectfully against anyone, who's not shipping Claudia and Mitch. So here's what he wrote, quote, "The fact that they both had so much baggage was part of the reason their relationship worked. They tended toward the same well-worn fatalism, and neither had any right to judge. When they were together, their pasts felt like they canceled each other out and made the future a little clearer." Kyle, that line to me is so important for what you've done for readers, what you've done for the characters, what you've done for Vince's legacy with where he left us in The Last Man. It's so meaningful.
It justifies his and Claudia's relationship. Like him and Anna didn't work. And ultimately that's why she got, sorry to say it, but ultimately that's why she got killed, because he knew he could never have that life with her, right, with a normal human being.
He can with Claudia.
Could have been anyone else. Pick a character. Could have been anybody. But the reason why him and Claudia makes sense is because of that paragraph.
Yep.
So it's perfect. It's perfect.
And it makes even better the epilogue of Consent to Kill. It makes the epilogue even better, in my opinion. The fact you can read the epilogue to Consent to Kill now with the understanding of where Mitch and Claudia are in their lives, and it's just mind blowing.
It makes even more sense. Yeah.
But it's paradoxical because it shouldn't make any sense. Yet the last 10, 15 years, whatever, of Mitch Rapp history gives it sense to something that is nonsensical is just a perfect paradox.
Right.
It's art. Again, we will say it. It is what makes most thriller summer beach reads just for fun into art, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and plus we got a Rory Nash name drop. Bang. Called that one. He's coming back, man. He's coming back.
You think he's coming back?
He's coming back.
So.
I'm telling
Don likes to hit up these younger characters. So maybe Rory Nash.
Am I allowed to say this? We've already been doing a little armchair authoring, armchair quarterbacking.
Sure, go ahead.
I got to be honest. If I want to see anything in the next 5-10 books of the Mitch Rapp series, it's Rory Nash's got to play a big role. And you don't kill Claudia. Do not Anna Riley Claudia. I'm sorry. Like, it could be an easy route out to do what Consent to Kill did and free up Mitch and be like, oh, Mitch is back in the game. No, that would be a cardinal sin to me. So that I'm not trying to say anything, not making up anybody's minds. But in my opinion, if you try to just repeat Consent to Kill just so that you can make it easier to write a Mitch Rapp story without the baggage of his family, you don't kill Claudia and Anna. You do. To me, that would be the cardinal sin of the next 5 to 10 books. But again, what do I know? I'm just a schmo. But that's just my personal gut feeling.
I got to see a Tommy Kennedy.
Dude,
and a Rory Nash involved.
Dude.
Or Rory Nash finds out that Mitch killed his dad. Like, or, like not like had a,
dude, that moment,
like,
that's the next big moment. That literally is going to be the next defining thing in the series. Whenever it comes, it could be years from now. That's the big one, though.
Yeah,
That's the big, and Kyle created that. See, Kyle made that possibility.
he did.
That's why, that's amazing. That's the long game.
That's the long game. Yeah,
When
yeah.
that day comes is going to be absolutely epic. Shannon, too. When Shannon gets the news, baby, what's his name? Charlie?
And Charlie. Yeah, yeah. I was kind of confused. They said that Charlie was sleeping on the counter. Like he's 2 years old. 2 years old don't really sleep on the counter.
Anna's still 7, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I know.
No, I don't. Is there evidence of that? I'm not sure. She's always 7. Anna will always be 7.
always 7.
It's kind of funny at this point. I enjoy it.
He said like the one thing happened like 2 months ago, and I was like, holy like everything has happened to Mitch in the last like 7 months. Like
So quick. Well, yeah. What's his name? Terrence Adams still has 3 years. So everything we know with the Cooks was all within his first year as president.
1 year. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Anything else you want to talk about in this first half?
No, dude, this was a lot of fun. I think we have a lot of questions.
We'll talk about the action. We'll talk about the action more with the scorecard.
Yeah, we'll talk about the action. Do you think we should save for next time, or should we get out of the way this really incredible sneaking into Syria at the border and then the op negotiating with Suleiman?
Yeah, no, we can talk. We can touch on that. I mean, that part of the story, like it's jiving, like it's clicking. You know, you could definitely tell. Like I was burning through some chapters. You know, it's got me page turning. We're getting Rapp like in his element. You know, even if it's in a place we've never been before with Rapp, you can definitely tell he's comfortable. But at the same time, he can't seem too comfortable because he is just supposed to be this lawyer from Canada. So it's funny. It's funny to see him operating within these certain parameters that he's been given, you know, with his cover.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens with a number of people, you know, with the driver who's taking him in, with the smugglers who are putting him over the wall and the fence. And then even when he's sitting down negotiating and dudes start pulling out guns and he hears firing, he's really got to be operating on different levels to know what he can and can't show and to whom, so that they don't evaluate him and come to the wrong conclusions. And then the way it builds up with the Syrian troops coming in, but they're holding off because they don't want to intervene just yet. But then the Russian guy finds out about it and he goes, tell them to go in or I'm going to hang every last one of them, is just building the tension. And then when the building actually crumbles and he puts Suleiman through the wall and he falls down like 3 stories.
Right.
And then the security guys are coming up the stairs. Rapp has to jump building to building. This is the scene that felt most Bond, like that opening scene in Mexico City of was that Spectre? Right. I had that feel here. Combine that with like a Beirut scene from American Assassin. All the feels were coming at me from your Bonds and your early Rapps. It was really cool. And eventually I'm like,
Jason Bourne. Yeah.
Right. I'm like, we could just have Rapp get out of this. We know he can escape and we know he can fight these guys off. Either one of those are options, but they blow his cover. So what is the because if he gets out, they know he's not just a lawyer, right? He had skills. And he ultimately decides, I've seen things like this go down where they just open fire on the crowd. Like if the crowd is starting to get raucous, they're throwing rocks at soldiers. The Russians and the Syrians and the Syrian-backed military with Russian equipment is not just going to sit back. This thing he knows is going to boil over. And so to kind of diffuse the situation so none of these protesters or rebels lose their lives, he goes, I'll turn myself in. Because once I do that, the Syrians and I get out of here, right? The army will just leave and things will cool down. But he's a fraction of a second late making that decision. So he sacrifices himself, gives himself up as Fournier to the Syrians. But as they're driving out, someone makes that shot. And once a Syrian soldier gets hit, they open fire on the crowd.
Yeah.
They just start mowing them down. So was his sacrifice for naught? That's what I'm wondering now.
It's sad in the end, you know, right where we left off. Yeah, no, the whole crumbling building scene is very cool. Like, and you know, that even that side character we got with the museum director and how he you know, ultimately he dies, but Mitch feels bad for him because, you know, he's not the one he didn't choose this life. He was forced into it. he says like I meant that I was going to get Damien to give him a couple $1 million for his museum, and
Yeah.
but now hopefully in the end we get in the epilogue that Damien gave some money to this museum, but those are
Yeah.
the little characters that you buy into, you like, because it's funny, like there's this one line, I think I highlighted it, where this guy is just going on talking like he's, oh, it's going to be €1 or like whatever the
Yeah.
equivalent is, and then within a second he starts rattling off like fluent drug cartel like language, and Mitch is like, all right, I'm dealing with someone completely different right now, like.
Yep.
And the way Kyle writes that too is very good. Kyle's been doing, every time he's hinted in this Latin American drug trade, he's he's liked it. He's done it very well. So I
Yeah.
like the character of Damian Losa, and I'm intrigued to see where we go in the second half of this book.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the museum director. That dude was awesome. He had no business fighting this war. He really wanted to be an academic, teach people about his culture, his history, his town. And yet, like we saw in Deadfall, the innocent people just trying to make their lives get caught up in the throes of war and rebellion, and it's sad. And I'm glad that personal element is here. And I'm glad Mitch feels that personal element even when he's got a mission and a job to do.
Right.
That felt so Deadfall in Ukraine, and all the different people we met in Deadfall, from the cab driver to scaling the wall to the museum director. It felt Deadfall in a really good way. The best parts of that book I felt were coming through. So, hot take so far, chapters 1-17. The first quarter of this book, a little tough to get going, but the second quarter of the book, chapters 10-17, absolute fire, absolute masterclass, and that makes me curious for what happens in the second half.
Yeah, it's not even like that. It just like was a little stop start, like one chapter was fire, and the next one was like, oh, what are we doing here? And then, but then as soon as we get going, like Mitch on scene in Syria, like we're cooking now.
Absolutely, we're rolling. Love it.
Very, very intrigued to see where we go in the second half.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, so next time we come to you, we will be bringing you either our second half of the novel or our interview with Kyle. Again, we need to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, who recently joined the Patreon group chat, Don, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using Apple Podcasts. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Insta at thrillerpodcast. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch.
Yo, that was a lot of fun. Even if it got dicey in the middle, it did for a good reason.
I think so.
Because we had to kind of get into things that were a little sticky for a little bit.
We had to. If not,
had to.
It'd just be.
You can't not say it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said it like when we first did this, like year one of this podcast. But now we're pot committed, bro.
Well, yeah. It's also we've gone through this a million times, and I feel like I thought I was going to have to come on here and kind of call a spade, and the fact that I got to the parts of the book that were killing it and I absolutely loved it, and then was able to think back and think of all these small moments which actually had a bigger impact, even if the story wasn't connecting for me, like you were saying, the flow wasn't there. Everything that was going on outside of a few little things like the Salerno op, everything that was going on otherwise hit on different levels, callbacks, Kyleisms. And it made me appreciate it so much. And I was appreciating that as I was getting to the kick-ass part of the story.
Right. No, that's completely true. And I think that's what helps sometimes when you think about these things as a whole, as opposed to just in the moment,
Yeah, exactly.